live.
All right, so today is March 11th. It is now 6:39, and this is the Budget and Grants Committee meeting, and we are called to order. So I guess the meeting guidelines is just everyone practice respect and decorum, and we thank you all for your investment in time and intellect and heart for building community collaboration and police reform. Public comment guidelines are please be respectful, and you have 3 minutes. And you want to elect a chair. Does anyone want to nominate someone for chair?
I nominate Alana Garrett Ferguson.
Second?
Speech.
Thank you, people, for your trust in my leadership. We vote?
You accept?
Oh, yes, I accept. So, roll call vote?
How about by acclamation?
Yeah. Okay.
We acclaim you.
Unanimous consent.
Unanimous
Yeah,
consent.
okay, cool.
2 thumbs up.
Yay.
4 thumbs up.
Now, move on to business. Executive Director report with the grant process update and grant manager request update.
Okay. Good evening. All right, I will start with the grant process update. Everyone has a copy of the spreadsheet. The one I sent an email is a little outdated. We updated it again this afternoon, so working off the draft that was on the table here. We have 5 organizations at this point that are complete. And when an organization is complete, it goes to finance department and accounting to get set up as a vendor. So those 5 haven't yet received funding because they're in the status of being set up in the system where the contract is entered. They're established as a vendor, and then at least one of them has made a funding request already. So as soon as that happens, the money will flow for those 5. As you can see, the other ones are in various stage. If they need additional information from the grantee, some of them are still going back and forth. It's noted there. Some of them are really close to being signed and completed and getting their vendor number. But a couple of them are still, the grantees are supposed to be providing us with information that they have not done so yet. But I anticipate very shortly, in the next few weeks, we'll be able to officially say that money is now flowing to the grantees for those 5 that are ahead out the gate. Shouldn't take much longer.
You said next week for funds?
I'm hoping that by next week, within 2 weeks for sure. We don't know yet how long it takes accounting to put them in the system. The system's called Advantage. Once they're in there, we can then do things on our end. So they would make a request from us to us directly for their funding, or a reimbursement for those who are on reimbursement. And then we can enter them into our Advantage ourselves at that point, and it will flow. So at that point, we own it, and the only thing we have to do is enter it, and it goes through the chain of approval in the office and to finance, who will approve it, and the checks will get cut. So
right before we started, Janita had gave me a copy of the email that said it takes 4 to 6 weeks for them to get the CCR, or is
that's what their very liberal estimate is that it can take that long, unfortunately. But hopefully we can push it a little faster than that. You know? Is there anything we need to do to help push it faster? Or I would say that now that you are the Budget and Grants chair, yes.
Okay.
What you can do is maybe write a letter to the mayor and the director of finance and just say, any way we can move these CCRs faster and get them an Advantage faster would be greatly appreciated. And I can help you with the drafting of that.
Thank you.
Yeah. There are always little nudges we can try. So that's the grant update. If there's no other questions about that, I can tell you what I know from council. So they have pretty much completed budget reconciliation. If you're watching that, we were not. There's no indication that our request for that $150,000 made it past or even into reconciliation conversation. So it looks like we hit a wall with that. What I do know is that they did create a staffing pool, from what I understand, which could have covered that $150,000. And they also, I was told today that they also had their budget fell about $90,000 that was unallocated at the end of reconciliation. So again, there was money available for us. So it was a choice on their part to not entertain our request.
How much money was left?
It was my understanding that went through reconciliation, there was about $90,000 that was still open to be determined where it was going to go, which is pretty much what our request was. We were 150,000, but for that staff position, remember we told council we could parse that, right? So if they wanted to cut the software part, which was $40,000, it would have been around 100,000 to give us a staff member if they so choose. But we weren't, from what I understand, we weren't even part of a conversation and reconciliation. So it seems like it was possible with the money, that it was just a political choice to not do it. So that's what I know so far. The budget will be officially out. They have to have it done by April. They're way ahead of schedule this year with their new system. So it should be any day where we have the finalized budget from council.
All right, thank you. Anything
You're
else?
welcome. No.
All right, moving on to the grant survey update. And then just for anyone watching, after that, we're going to talk about the 2024 CPC program update. And we did make a switch to move the third-party assistance item up before the rest of that conversation. But right now, we'll talk about the grant survey update.
I wish Jason was still up here because
Jason can come back.
to give everyone an update, we're in an RFP stage.
Oh, if this is for the community survey or
Oh.
for the grant survey? I think this was for the grantee survey.
So-
The smaller.
Yeah, so I sent a draft of the grantee survey, I believe to you and Ryan a couple weeks ago. Jason, I'll look it up in a
Is it approved by you? Are you ready to go with it?
I mean, I'm ready
Okay.
to go with it. I replied all. I think you were on it.
Did you send us a copy?
I don't know. Here, I'm gonna look right now.
Okay.
Because that one, we don't need RFP. It's not going to cost money. So as soon as this committee says go live, we can go live. I do remember a discussion about should we wait until some money is out there before we ask them what their experience was, just to move some of these contracts ahead further. That's up to this group to tell me when you want to do it.
Yeah, I wanted to know, how did you guys feel? Do you want to send the survey out at this point? Do you want to wait to disbursement? Do you want to wait to, I don't know, a quarter of reimbursements or anything like that? Like, how far do you want to wait before we send it out?
What kind of question? I don't think I've seen it, so.
I haven't seen it either. From my understanding, it's just it's the gist of it is, what is your experience with the grant process? And I'm guessing it would only go to grantees, or would it go to anybody who applied?
To the grantees was the main focal point, I think, for people who are going through the full process. But we could send it to people who applied, but we might have to tweak some of the questions if we just wanted to know specifically what was the application process like for them.
Okay.
To the chair, so my recollection was that it was the survey was created in a way where there were like some general questions, and then depending on how you answer the question, if you identify as a community member, then you would be directed to questions for community members. If you were a person who applied for a grant, you'd be directed there. If you were a commissioner who worked on the grants, or just a commissioner in general, I just thought it was.
So
You
the audience is
remember when we worked
open.
on that?
I do, but I thought we had changed it from it was just grantees and applicants, but it might have also included anybody. So if you don't have to have applied at all, just anybody can fill it out.
I don't remember that part. I just know that I think it was like the commissioners, the applicants, and I want to say the grantees.
Is that what you prepared?
I just replied all to the draft that I sent out. I sent it out on February 5th to John, Alana, Jason, Pete, Ryan, and Sharina. No, it's okay. That was So that's the draft.
So it seems like if we're asking them about the process, we should wait until they've gone through the process, I would think, right?
I think so too.
Is there a way to separate? It may be because it's the copy is from SurveyMonkey, but is there a way that people do say if they are if they were an applicant? Like I see that first question, but does the questions filter out differently for all of those? Okay. Sorry.
So whichever one of those you click on.
Yeah. So in the email I sent Jason, I asked Ryan to upload my edits to the SurveyMonkey and send a draft to me. I haven't gotten that draft back yet, so if you could send me that as soon as possible, so then I can circulate it to the group, that would be great.
I will do that.
Thank you so much for your work on that, Commissioner. Is there anything else you want to provide us with?
No, thank you.
All right, and I think moving on under the 2024 CPC grants program update. Again, for those watching, we did update the agenda just a little bit. We're going to have the update on third-party assistance first, and that's going to be Commissioner Van Leer.
Thank you, Chair. So yeah, I at the last meeting, we talked, I mean, I don't remember what we talked about in terms of this specifically, but I've been talking to potential intermediary organizations or third-party organizations who might be interested in, like Neighborhood Connections did this last year with the $50,000 grant with the goal of re-granting it through their network and through their process, their established process of making grants in the community, to talk to organizations about would they be interested. And so far, of the 5 organizations I've talked to, 4 have said they're definitely interested. The other is interested but needs to have internal conversation because I just talked to them today. So I think there's a lot of potential there for us to reach more broadly into the community, and also at the same time as sort of taking the burden, a big chunk of the work off of us, so that we can focus more on the civilian oversight of policing and the accountability work that is one of the primary reasons we are here. So yeah, so if you have any questions about that, or the process could be, for example, rather than putting out an RFP for grassroots organizations, we could put out an RFP for intermediary organizations, and we would have a process, an application that had the relevant questions for them, like thinking about the criteria we might have. Do you have experience making grants? Do you have experience making grants in the city of Cleveland? Those kinds of questions. We could really dig into that, and we could just come up with an RFP, an application process that would be geared toward those kinds of potential intermediary organizations. I mean, there's other ways we could do it, but that would be a very transparent, sort of process where they would go through our interview process. And then ideally, if we were to do that, then we could gather those, have those conversations with them and make our decisions and approach city council with the sort of collectively and say, here are the idea would be to go above $50,000. So approval would be required from city council for those grants. And then approach city council as a group and say, here are the organizations that we're asking for, and they could, respond to questions, and we go through the process with city council. I'm sure there would be barriers and hurdles, but it would allow us to A, disperse larger amounts, and B, address ahead of time potentially the reimbursement piece of it. So if some of these organizations say, well, we can't really do that reimbursement piece, many of them I think already have some experience working with the city. That maybe there would be a way to disperse the money in larger chunks so that they could then get it more quickly and easily out to the smaller groups that are applying for the grants, whether whichever groups those might be. So that is the essence of it. I don't know if there's questions or how do we want to talk about this. And the reason I wanted to move this up was because if we're talking about the revision of our application and rubric and we want to go in this direction, we'd be able to, you do those things differently, or whether it's entirely through intermediary organizations or a hybrid or what have you.
At any chance, have we spoken to anyone in the council's office about what the process could possibly look like, or the finance department, what the process could possibly look like with having an intermediary?
Well, I know that came, there's been interest, whatever. I don't know what you could fill me in. I watched some of that meeting that you all had. There were some questions around the grant making, but I did happen to run into Council President Blaine Griffin last week when I was at City Council at the Safety Committee meeting, and I mentioned this idea, and he said, when I first said intermediary or a third-party organization, he asked if it was potentially the Cleveland Foundation. I said, no, actually, more likely to be some different kinds of organizations that have this track record in the community. And he said to keep them posted, which is nothing in stone, but it's at least a indication of interest and willingness to have that conversation. So that's just City Council. It's not finance or I guess who's writing our contracts? Is it the legal department? So it's not legal. I mean, didn't have that conversation. So I feel like we'd have to have a few of those conversations and flesh it out. But we could make it happen potentially quickly enough, so that we could get the money out sooner than we did last year. Obviously sooner than we did in the first go round, but it's probably going to take some time. So the sooner we can get moving, the better if we want to do this.
Commissioner Kennedy, do you have any thoughts?
My impression is that council at all will be very supportive of this. Also, we've gotten feedback from the community that they would much prefer that we disperse these funds through an intermediary organization because they haven't been happy with the process that's been going on for this round. So I think there's a lot of support for this, and thanks, Pete, for doing all this investigation.
Chair, since you have joined us, do you have any thoughts about this?
To the chair, I think it's that Commissioner Van Leer and I think we also had a conversation. I think we need to entertain the options that are going to be best for us to manage these grants. So my top concern is just having 26 is already a lot, and I think I would like to limit the amount that we give out this year because we didn't get the grants manager position, and just the idea of just managing a 26 is a lot. I would be concerned about doing too many more. And then also I think we need to know what that process of going to council looks like. And it's a new program, second year, so I think we should try some different things to try to figure out what's going to work best for us in the community. So I support at least exploring it and figuring out. I mean, we don't even know fully what we can legally do. So I just support it. I think we still have a lot to figure out with the program.
Okay, so thinking most of us are on board with at least exploring or doing some version of this. So I guess my next question is, would we want to disperse all of our money through intermediaries? Would we want to do a hybrid, a little bit like mini grants or something for some community members and some intermediaries? Like, what are you guys thinking? I know Commissioner Van Leer, you've done most of the research on this. Just wondering, what is your vision for this?
I'm flexible, but if you were to ask me how I think would be best, and so thanks for that question, would be to go all in and put this RFP out as, for intermediary organizations, because as co-chair Adams just said, I mean, if we were to let's put some of the money into smaller grants, then we would probably get another 90 applications, and it wouldn't really reduce the burden. And it actually might increase it in some ways, because then we'd also have we'd have a 2-track process. So I guess my gut would be, let's go all in, but I know I don't know. I mean, that's just me. But I think we could make it happen more quickly, and we'd have fewer organizations we'd have to come up with some criteria, and maybe we could even talk about that a little bit tonight. There would be fewer organizations that would be eligible, and then it would just be more streamlined process.
I agree with Pete. I think distributing the funds through an intermediary organization would be best. I think the grantees would report higher satisfaction with that. And I think in addition to like the actual, like, all the hours during application process, those sorts of things, that would help us. But in addition to that, communicating with the city and grantees at this phase, trying to get the funds out, is so much work that I think we didn't necessarily plan for, and has delayed the disbursement of funds. And it sounds like these intermediary organizations have not been having that problem. So I think it would be wise to do it all through intermediaries.
Okay, I guess we're doing it all through intermediaries. So
I mean, yeah, I don't know.
I do have, my only concern is I'm aware of another government grant process in the city that is similar to ours, and those grantees, the money was given to an intermediary, and those grantees are still waiting to get their money as well. And so while the application process on the front end was so much easier, so much smoother, there still, it has been a delay with those. And then I think and that's probably another conversation. Like, I would just want to make sure the criteria for intermediary, it's just a fair process, and that it includes that we have some say over even how they choose people. I wouldn't want it to be just like a free for all. So I think kind of thinking along lines of like, if we give an org some money, they can't like give it out to people to like, I don't know, give hamburgers away to kids. Like, they have to not just align in their mission, but in their announcing of the grant. Because I'm thinking like, it's competing organizations. Like, I think my brain has questions around like, if it's 4 organizations and each, I don't know, have $20,000 to give, what would make nonprofit A, B, and C, what would prevent them from applying from organization A and organization B? Because it's the same thing. So I think I would want to have more conversations around that, because I don't want us to sow so much competition amongst community organizations that people are able to like double dip, take extra money, or not get funded some of those smaller groups.
To the chair. So the other thing we'll see this year is the reality may be that we may not be able to change the speed of the city. We may not, we're not gonna be able to change their processes. And we might have to think about how we do this a little bit differently. We'll see how it goes, but we may be in a scenario where we might have a calendar year program, and the funds from, like, they were in 2024 and we went through everything, and they get we'll make sure they get the funds in 2025. I don't know. Like, I'm not sure, if selecting fewer grants, mini grants, I'm not sure what that's going to change about like the city's process. So that's like, as everyone's talking, trying to figure out how do we get ourselves in a position where we can have enough institutional knowledge to navigate it well enough where we kind of know in a small time frame when people will get their funds. I think that's one of the biggest stressors for some of the grantees that we've done this year is that, we thought that they would have the funds sooner than they are going to get them. And so they planned accordingly and now they don't have their funds. So I think, we'll have to see how this plays out, but we might have to adjust, because we know we can encumber money before the end of the calendar year. I don't know. I'm just trying to just think about, if we have the same issues with larger and fewer grants, then maybe just how the city operates, and we might need to adjust.
So, yeah, I think, well, so Kate, sorry, and I spoke with folks at the Cleveland Foundation about their neighborhood safety fund. And we'll have to follow back up because I didn't get a sense, I didn't realize from that conversation, that I know they had challenges, but I didn't realize that funding hadn't gone out. So that's some follow-up question. Oh,
Yeah.
Yes, sorry.
To the chair, just some logistical options for you here. First is the legality of it. There's two different, they're not labeled, but paragraphs in 115.5 that apply. One of them is under your duties and authorities, right? It says making of grants for violence prevention, restorative justice, or mediation programs, right? So that's one part of it, and that's a little bit paraphrased. It's a lot because it says for the purposes of reducing police intervention or something along those lines, right? That's the whole sentence, give or take a few words. The other part is in the budget, where it says a set of the budget will be put aside for this grant programming. So there's two things in there when Martin and I looked at it, and we had a preliminary conversation about this. What I would like from law is a written legal opinion of what we can do, not what we can't do. So I told him what I want this question framed as: how do we, right, make it so that we can use a third party to administer this grant program without us losing our statutory authority, right? So that's the question, because we still probably need to have statutory authority for, to your point, for final approval of who gets this money, but it doesn't mean that there can't be a workhorse in between, right, to carry the brunt of that load and allow the commission to focus on the police reform stuff and the hearings and all the other things that the community wants us to do. So that's the question that I asked law department to examine, and we need a legal opinion on it.
could I just ask you, just because I feel like at some level we already did this last year with Neighborhood Connections. We
Sure.
gave them 50,000 to
So I brought that up too, that we have already done it, right? So there's a couple of ways we can go about it. One, we can make this our program this year, right? So that would be a competitive grant program for organizations that want to be intermediaries, just like Pete said. We had already accepted a proposal last year that was like that on a smaller scale, right? But we're talking about a larger scale. So we might get 4, we might get 2, we might get 6. I don't know how many would apply if we did that. So you would have to make the determination whether it's one gets the whole enchilada or it's divided up on, into fifths for people to distribute. Don't know. But that could be the program. The other option is an RFQ, which is actually soliciting a business proposal for one entity to manage this for us, right? So it would be a little bit different if you chose that route, because it's not the grant program itself. You're doing a request for proposal to hear the business proposition. And under that circumstance, only one organization would get the whole enchilada, right? So you have two different pathways which you could consider this. We didn't see a problem with the question of, could we pay administrative fees if we did it the business way? It doesn't look like it says that we can't use a portion of that money to pay somebody an appropriate, reasonable administration fee to do this, right? If you were to choose the business option. It also doesn't look like we're prohibited from grantees if we were to do it the other way, saying we will do this, but our administrative costs will be 5% or 10% or whatever the industry norm is, right? So it looks like either way we're covered. So it comes down to, what does this committee want to do? And then what legally can we do, right? But I think that from preliminary legal, it looks like there's nothing that restricts us from doing this, right? It's just how creative can we get within 115.5 to make sure that we don't give away our final authority on who gets these grants, right?
Can you just
So
call a request for business?
Yeah, so the other one is a request for qualifications or a request for proposal, right? And when we say we have to be clear. We also do that for grants. We're like a request for your grant proposal, right? So we need to just define, are we doing this as our grant program for 2024? Because we could stand that up pretty quickly once we get the go ahead, right? And to your point, you can put in your criteria of accountability to that organization. So you could say, we require you to get these funds out once you award a grantee within 2 weeks, right? As part of their proposal, they're tied to that. They have to do it and it'll be in their contract. But the difference will be if you awarded 3 organizations, $400,000 each or whatever, right? Their contract would be the thick and intensive one that everyone has gone through. These smaller grantees have gone this year, right? But they would then have the ability to do much lighter, faster, and leaner contracts on their end. But they would still have to go through the full accountability process with us. The difference is it would be a small number, so we should be able to get it done very quickly and efficiently.
So I guess I just want to add a thought. And so in terms of the intermediary piece, never mind. I think you covered it. I would come back to me. There was something very specific in response to you, but then I lost it.
So I guess for this process, since this is where the committee is leaning towards, how would you guys want to do the intermediary process? Would you want it to be competitive, 2 or 3 people apply? Would you want it to be more of like the scenario interim executive director Goodrick told us, where there's like a request for business and it's just this one entity? Like, what is your thought process with this? I guess is my next question.
I'm open to whatever. I guess one of the things that what I was going to say was that in the conversations I've had with some of these organizations, that they've often said that when they do this, they include people from, in terms of like decision making, they include people from the original origin of the money, the originator of the money, in their process in some way or other. So that's certainly something that we could think about. Do we want to do that? How would that look? And I think we'd also, in our process, we'd want to be clear on the accountability reporting piece. Like, how do we want not only to be involved, if at all, but also how do we want that reporting from them as they make their grants and they follow up and they're seeing what's happening? How do we want to be involved with that? So, I mean, I'm open to either of these. I feel like, I've been, I'm a little bit biased because I've been having these conversations and like did some work on this, but that doesn't mean it has to be the number one, but I think that way we just put out the application for these intermediaries and see who applies. It doesn't have to be the 5 that I've talked to already. It could be others and we could figure out a way to elicit responses that show their strengths and how they would do this and in their proposal.
So would you, no, I'm not saying it's to be those 5, but I'm saying, so would you want one org or would you want several intermediaries? I just trying to figure it out.
Yeah, I'm saying it would be more than one. I would say
You would want several. Okay.
I mean, we could put a proposal, an RFP out, said apply for a grant from us that you will re-grant. Tell us how much you want and how. We wouldn't say it's got. I mean, in my mind initially, I was like, well, we divided up 4 or 5 ways, but no, it's like one group may only want $100,000. Another group may say we could do $300,000. Depending on the group and their experience, they might have. So they would put forward and if say we get, more money, like $2 million of requests, we could then adjust as needed. Like not all of those would apply. We wouldn't select all of them, maybe, or maybe we would say we'd like to, based on what we see here, we'd like to give you this amount and you this amount. I mean, it would just be a regular process where we're deciding on grants essentially that they're going to re-grant the money, but there'd be flexibility there based on the strength of each application.
I'm just wondering, since this is supposed to be organizations over individual grants, if on the back end we should come up with a number. So either 1, 3, or 4, or 5, or 6. I think there's a benefit of that, of like, okay, we know that we're not going to fund more than 6, or we don't know if we're going to fund more than 3. And I say that because outside of the ones that you just talked to, and because of the language, I know that when we send this out, we're going to have to do it very in a very specific way, because I guess I'm imagining if it's just more open like that, then that means that there's a lot of small family foundations. There's a lot of other funders who would qualify as a type of business that could apply to this. And I'm worried we would still have that same volume of applications to look at. Because then it's like, oh, well, you have the little mom and pop foundation that nobody ever heard of that was just created. And technically they can be a funder because they give out $5,000 at their church every year. Like you have those type of of organizations that exist in the city and in the county and other places. So I'm just concerned about us not putting that we might need to limit it so that we don't have 45 funders emailing us or applying.
And when Pete brought this to have a brainstorm on it to the staff, it's really important if you do it this way that you set criteria, fiscal criteria so they have to have, I would recommend that you put strong fiscal vetting on these organizations. If you're talking about maybe giving them $250,000 to re-grant, they really have to have time in the field, a proven accounting history, and then, a track record of being able to do this. So if you set your criteria, you'll limit who might be eligible for that, right? There may be only a handful that meet that criteria, but you really want to be careful if you're doing this. One of the criteria has to be showing a strong fiscal accounting record and that you've been in existence for X number of years and have a track record of being able to redistribute grant money, whether it's federal grant money or private foundation money, in this way, because it's a little bit more trust. You don't want to give $250,000 to an org that doesn't have a record that you trust, and then they're not able to deliver, because that would be a significant problem at that point.
So for this, we would essentially, instead of having a pre-vetting process, we will have an eligibility page that lists out a very strict criteria. And I guess if we do it that way, maybe we wouldn't have to select a number. I'm just really leery around just having it be open. But I think if that's what the majority feels, that it should just be more of that eligibility form and not limiting the number, I'm open to it. That was just a concern I threw out there.
But I want to go back to your concern of how would we make sure that applications weren't duplicated across multiple fiscals? I think that would be difficult. And then if I'm not sure if I'm interpreting Jason's explanation correctly, but it sounds like from what he said, the other option was picking one fiscal. So I'm wondering if having multiple is even an option at all. I'm not sure. So that's something to think about.
If you for a point of clarification through the chair, if you run it as a business process like we're doing when we hire a consultant or anything else, right? Typically, I've never seen them split awards that way, right? You're doing a competitive process to say who is the best person to enter into contract to do this with, right? It's separate than the open competitive grant process where we found neighborhood connections, right, on a larger scale. So that you could award multiple. You could split it. You can go with 1 or 5 if you chose, right? So that's where you get more flexibility in your choice when you do it the second way. And it covers our base of running a program, right? So we have a challenge to run a program. We either do it the way we did it already last year with some improvements, or we do it this way, which we know will fast track us in many ways to get that money out, right? But officially, it is our grant program for the year to do it that way. On the flip side, if you went the other way, the business route, you could maybe get a multi-year contract, right? So you could select an organization to say, we're going to give you a 3-year contract with the option to renew if you do a good job, the ability to manage these grants, right? So you could take that off the table in one shot if you did it the business way, and if that was lawfully allowed, you could say that the expectation will be for the next 3 years, you have to meet these criteria, and you will receive an estimated $1.1 million. You're allowed to do X percent in administrative fees for yourself, and the rest of it has to go out to the street under our terms. So if you chose one, the option could be a multi-year contract with that one business entity to save yourself down the line, maybe the next 2 years, since some of you are 4 years and you have 2 years left. you could only deal with one business entity possibly for that 2 years under a business contract.
So yeah, I think what I heard you asking, Kate, also was like, if we were to go that route where we had put out an RFP and multiple organizations applied and we selected 4 or 5 or however many, the issue you raised of what if one group applies to all of them and gets all the grants, right? So we have to think about what do we think about that? And if we are concerned about that, we'd have to, we could require those groups, for example, to put in their application process. You cannot apply for grants from these other organizations or something like that. Because I think that was your question, right? Like, would it even be possible to do that? And I think it does raise a concern, definitely. And we want to figure out how we feel about that. And if it is an issue and we go that route, we'd want to put in place a way to prevent that if we don't want it to happen. Now, if we go with the one business entity, like that business contract, that's solved because no one's going to be able to apply for 2 grants in the same process.
And that is definitely a consideration that I thought of once you said that is, so if you give to 5, right, you also are putting more work on the grantees because they may have to apply to 5 different places to hope that they get some money, right? So the broader you distribute this and the more people you have, so there's already one program at the Cleveland Clinic Foundation, right? How many programs are we going to make grantees apply to? We already saw the landscape. Like the landscape isn't going to change this much before it was last year. Cleveland Foundation got the same grantees mostly that we got as applicants, right? So we know what the applicant pool looks like after this year, right? So the question is, if we know there are a lot of people trying to start up these programs out there, how many people do we want to make them go go through this process, right? So that is your other thing. The more you divide it up, the more work you make these N-level grantees have to do because now they would have to apply next year to 4 different organizations to hope that they get funded, right? So there's that too as well, because I don't think there's that many candidates out there where you could say if one applied here, they can't apply here, because then you're limiting their ability to get money. What if they didn't get it there, but the other organization might have found their program worthy? So you run into that where if you distribute this among 3 different agencies, they're actually in competition with each other at that point, and so are the grantees to try and get some money from one of these 3. And if you add the Cleveland Foundation in that's 4 different places they can apply to for basically the same thing. So it just adds a level of stress to find your money, and it spreads it a little thinner.
Yeah, I think one of the lessons we've learned from this past year is if we have the option to make things streamlined and reduce complication and reduce workload, then that's generally a positive thing. So I'm open to suggestions, but I just don't see a feasible path with multiple fiscals in this scenario.
Point of clarification, because I noticed your language changed a little bit, so I wanted to understand the business consultant way of doing it. Who will be eligible? Will these be nonprofits, or could this be any type of business entity?
We define it. So we would define that, and Commissioner Kennedy went through this a little bit when we're looking at doing a business proposal for to have a consultant come in to help us reach more people in the survey, right? So she's seen what the draft RFQ looks like for that and how it works. So we would basically post it on the city bid wall, right? It wouldn't go out as a grant application. It would go out as a business. We're looking for entities who want to bid on getting this business, right? In this instance, you can define what those entities must be qualified. So you can say they have to be a registered nonprofit entity, a 501(c), whatever it may be, right? You can define that, what you want them to be, who you're looking for, right? And then we would, it would be for this amount, it would go through a very extensive bid process because it would be over $1 million in money delivered directly to them. So they would have to go through the highest level of scrutiny, both through us, through the city's board of control and city council, if we were to choose that route. It's not the fastest way to do it. The fastest way would be the other way. So if you can also do the grant program, right, competitively, and say you're only going to award either one or two, right? You can be clear in that too. So you can do it this other way where we open it as our own grant program, right? We're not doing the business solicitation bid process. We're opening it as our grant program, but you can again define the parameters in that and say, we will only award a maximum of two people, which means, roughly $600,000 each, right? Because council did make that point about sprinkling the money too thin. They had brought that up when we went there before. It's like, well, if you have 25 grantees, maybe you spread yourself a little too thin, and maybe you're spending this money a little too thin in that way. So we could do it. We could limit also how many proposals we're going to award out of that, and say we might get 8 applicants in our grant process, but we're only going to award 2 up to $600,000 or whatever it may be.
The question, so the option you're talking about, putting on the bid wall, the city's bid wall, my brain is not working tonight because I had a very clear question. And I was listening to the rest of your conversation. Go ahead, it'll come back.
Do we know what the neighborhood safety fund, what option they chose between the two that you just described?
So with the neighborhood safety fund, it's a very unique situation because it was ARPA money, right? So I don't think they had to go through this. They just had to follow whatever the federal guidelines were for using that money, right? And then they kind of had a license to do what they wanted as long as council approved it.
Okay.
Because once it was delivered to the city, it was up to council how they wanted to appropriate it. So I don't think they had to go through a competitive process for that.
It sounds like there was a long process where the Cleveland Foundation and the city sort of talked through it and figured it out, and a lot of back and forth between the city and the council. But my question is, regarding the option where it would be a one, up on the city bid wall, whatever you call it, and would that, how would that work in terms of, because we have like $1.08 million or whatever that amount is every year, and it's not like a lowest bidder issue or anything, or would it be like the group that said that the lowest percentage of, how does that work?
So so it would come down to passing through the money isn't an issue, right? It would come down to looking at administratively what they're charging us to do that business. So that would be how we evaluate them. That's right. Their ability to pass that money through would be one of the criteria we evaluate on. But we'd also have to look at their own administrative fee schedule, right? And in the city's procurement, it actually does say that departments are supposed to default to the lowest bidder unless they have a reason not to, right? So if for instance, one organization charged 15% administrative fees and one charged 10, but we like the one who charged 15% better, we would then have to write a justification to go over to the city of why we are choosing to spend more money than what the lowest bidder was going to do and deliver the same thing, right? So you have to just make sure that you have a justifiable reason to do that if you are going to choose the not lowest bid under our procurement policy. And we really don't have to decide it tonight. Like we could do like an analysis of the pros and cons of each, right? Pete, you're already leading this, so if you wanted to make it a point, we could come in and we could just lay out the pros and cons of each and select a plan. And I do want to make it clear, we are going to do a plan A and a plan B. So we're not dropping the work that we already started in case we get told we can't do this for some reason, or the forces of the universe come against us again and say, you just aren't going to do this, whether you can or can't, that we're ready to go with our traditional grant program. So I know there's already been, meetings with Shalana to do the legwork on that. So I'm not going to throw that out the window. I want to make sure that if this doesn't work out for some reason, we still have the ability to go live with a traditional grant program like we did last year, except a more streamlined, efficient one.
Oh, just really quickly, I just wanted to say that if we can do this, remember that we were the ones that put the certain parameters around the grants. We were the ones that said that you had to live in Cleveland proper. We were the ones that said that that focused on the not-for-profit organizations. So just remember, I think that if we did do an outside organization, that what would go in the RFQ would be some language that explains that they're literally executing a program that sort of has designs by us. So I think, remember that we are the ones that put those parameters around the program.
Do you, either one of you have any more thoughts on this? Van Leer, Commissioner?
No, I think I'm open to whatever. Obviously, we're not going to decide tonight, and we're still going to have a couple tracks here, so I'm happy to help out and figure it out. And I think there could be some other conversations to be had with the city, and if we get a legal opinion, that would be helpful too.
As my closing thoughts would be, I like the idea of the intermediaries. I personally would want to stay away from the bidding process. I think that Charter Amendment 115, while the a lot of the public opinion has been we don't spend a lot of our time on this, I think that there's a reason they wanted the commission to have a grant program. And so I would feel more comfortable if we at least kept the program and figured out a competitive way to offer it to one or two or three other nonprofit grantees. I think that, this, just in the spirit of 115, I will say that to end. But also, we have spent a lot of time on this topic. And I think to interim executive director Goodrich's point, is there a way, I don't know if you maybe and Commissioner Van Leer work together on a pros and cons of both options of what will work? And then Commissioner Van Leer, do you want some support around contacting legal or finance to get answers to your questions? Would you want someone else on the committee to do that? Or do you want to do that as well?
We could just put Martin right in our meeting so that we can have direct feed to legal.
Okay. And then finance, I guess any of us can send that email. So Commissioner Ray, I'll send the questions to finance so you don't have to worry about that.
Well, what questions are you going to send?
The ones around if we're allowed to, like I said, it is a law.
I think we should just
Law.
go
Okay, so everything
one
will just be
route.
law.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think let's keep it streamlined.
Okay, so I guess by the next budget and grants meeting, is that good to have that done by?
Sure. Yeah, and I think that conversation started to figure out. I think the conversation about what we're legally able to do, I think that conversation has started with law as well. I know, while I was still chair, I know that we were trying to figure out some of those options. So, yeah.
And I think process-wise that we will be able to bring back to the next budget and grants committee the first week of April, right? Would be real tangible proposals to send forward to the commission. Say this is what we'd like to do. It's already been vetted, right? So then we just choose which option is best, voted forward, and we'll be ready to go with a program right after that.
So that would be at the end of April, the full commission would vote on this.
Well, we may if we wanted to get it started right away, we would just ask for a special meeting just to vote on the grant program for this year. I think that would be best. So we could probably by the second week of April know what we're going to do, let the public know what we're going to do, and then start standing this up live. Because I'm very hopeful that no matter what we choose, that we stay ahead of the schedule this year and we can get these things done by June. Have whatever program we're doing. Wrapping up by the end of June.
I think my question was, do we want to wait until April to have another budget and grants meeting? To your point.
I think that depends on if you have something to meet.
Yeah, we have
We're
to.
done. If we can get it done in a week.
What I'm saying is what we need is the pros and cons list of which subject, and I think that could potentially be maybe the only thing that's on the agenda. But if we had another budget and grants meeting before April, I think that it would be good to really have something like going straight into the month. We know exactly. So I don't know what people's capacity is, and I know if Commissioner Van Leer, if you need help, like I have no problem supporting you in this. But I would like for us to have that list and make the decision on what we're going to do before April 1st.
To the chair, I think we also have to just like you want to move it, but we also need some answers. We also need to know what we can do legally. I mean, I agree with what was said. I think based on the two sections of the charter that mentioned, there's two lines that mention the grants, and I don't see anything there that would stop us from doing it. But I do think we should. I would hate for us to be revising this and then go down this road and they're like, and now we're in legal tape. So
Well, legal would be at that next meeting.
What we can do is when we finish it, send you an immediate notification, and if you want to schedule something right after we're done, and if it's, that way we know when because we don't know when we'll be done with that. So we can, as soon as we're finished, we can notify this committee, and if you feel like it's expedient, and you want to move the process forward and save 2 weeks maybe, we can figure out immediately when we could schedule a special budget and grants just to talk about that.
Okay. And I guess that's how we'll handle that process. And I think the next two items on the agenda were about application and revision and rubric revision. But it seems like there's not much to talk about there at this point because I know all three of us worked on that. But seeing as we are going down this other hole first, I think we can save that to the next budget and grants meeting. Is everyone else okay with tabling those two? All right, and then now we'll move into public comment.
You can sit there.
I will have a suggestion. I heard Commissioner Lear said, Van Lear said, Mr. Griffin was not that interested in having organization like
No,
Cleveland
that's not what I
Foundation.
said. He was actually wanted to be posted. He was interested and said, keep me posted.
Oh, but the thing is, I would prefer we get the idea that if we can have a well-known organization to do that, even we will put out RFP, because city budget process, even this time they are a little bit ahead comparing to before. If we don't know if that could be a good thing this year, or they will really have that in the future. They will all be on time to do that. So in order not to affect our process, if they are late, we can be delayed as well, right? So it would be good. We would try to talk to some big organization, the well-experienced ones, and to see. And we also ask them for the remedy when they have a short time to put out a grant. What would they do? Just for in case, because we do not know who eventually will be the one this committee will select or recommend it to the whole commission to approve for this RFP. That's one thing. And the other thing is, if you want to separate to like one big grant out, and I would say it's good to have a small one. Yes, that will create the workloads, but if we do not handle that, still let the outside contractor to handle the big one and the small one both. That will be good for the commissioners to spend the time. I'm just saying, even you decide to put that two different big grant and a small grant amount, I think that's a good idea because you do have some grassroots organizations. They may not have the ability to do the bigger scale program. So whatever they want to do probably is for limited geographic locations or to serve a special particular population in the community. In that case, I think it's good to still separate that. But if we have a good organization take the job, we just let them do that. Thank you.
All right, thank you for your comments. And so I guess we want to look at our calendars to see when in April we'll have our next budget and grants meeting.
It's already set.
Oh, that's right. Every second
Do you
one.
want to change the timing of it? Like, can we do it earlier or do you want it to stick at 6:30?
I like the time that it is.
6:30 is good? Okay.
All right, and so at this point, we will formally adjourn. All right.
Thank you.
Okay, hold on one second.